Hey everybody, my name's Eric Clark and I'm with Remax Solutions, and today I'm here with Michael Schneider, who's the attorney and owner of the title company of Brevard. And we've kind of been brainstorming and thought, every buyer and seller that's out there who's going to be purchasing a home here in Central Florida is going to have to work on some sort of contract, and Michael was like, let's do a video breaking down the sales contract we use here locally.
Right, and just as a little preliminary, as an attorney, I have to say this. None of what I'm telling you is legal advice, and I'm not soliciting you to be your attorney. Florida Bar wants me to tell you that, and I want to tell you that as well.
Tell us about the contract we use here a lot here locally. What's the main one we use?
Locally, we use in Brevard County, which is where Eric and I operate mostly, is used to be called the FAR Bar, FAR for Florida Association of Realtor, Bar for the Florida Bar. Now it's called the Florida Realtors, but it's the FAR Bar contract, and we use the as-is portion, the as-is version of that, and in a later video we'll explain what we mean by as-is. But basically, the Florida Bar and the Florida Realtors Association back in 1973 got together and said, basically put a joint committee together to come up with a contract form. And that's the industry standard form that's used. It's basically a check the box, fill in the blank contract. It's periodically updated as changes to the law and any bombshell case law comes out that's merited any changes. And it's periodically updated. Currently we're using the April 2017 version.
And now what I really like about the FAR Bar in particular, actually we have two different types of contracts we can use. The FAR Bar that Michael just mentioned, there's also the CRISP, which we're not really going to get into because it's not so popular here in Brevard County. But both of these contracts are fill in the blank form. For me, I'm a realtor. You don't need this guy, an attorney, to actually fill it out. So that's the difference here compared to other parts of the country. If you're buying a house in New York, for example, I know is an attorney-based area, and even though the realtors might do some of the negotiations, it's all written up by an attorney.
And if you think about it, the reason we use a standard form is because when Eric receives an offer or presents an offer, he doesn't want to have to reinvent the wheel on every deal. So when Eric has the listing and another agent presents an offer, Eric knows the specific places in the contract that he's going to look for the highlight points. And again, it's a fill in the blank, check the box contract. And he also knows that he's not going to be looking at a different contract form from every different office that operates in Brevard County and presents a different contract form and might have a trap door in there, or something that he's got to be concerned about. So obviously he's going to read every contract that's presented, but the boilerplate language in there he doesn't have to dive into on every single deal. He has familiarity with it, as do I, and as do most real estate professionals that operate in the county. That's one of the reasons we use a standard form.
The first time I sit down with the buyer, we're going to go through page 1 through page 12 and go over the highlights that pertain to this particular property or particular type of property that they're putting an offer in. So if they happen to not get that first house that we look at and present the offer, it's an easier process for them. They're a little more familiar with it on house number 2 or house number 3 that they present that offer.
Right.
So yes, there are a lot of parts to this contract, but really any contract only has a few things that must be taken care of. And what are some of the basics that must be taken care of on it?
Well, you could literally write a contract out on one sheet of paper, identify the two parties, the property, the sale price, and it has to be signed by both parties. That's the main basics. But when you're using a form like this, obviously you need to make sure that it's filled out as completely as possible. And the main thing is it has to be what we call a mirror image. Both parties have to agree to all the terms. One party can't say, well, I want to close on December 31st, and the other party say, I want to close on December 30th. They have to agree on all terms, everything from the deposit to the closing date to the amount of financing, whether there's going to be financing, what kind of financing, and those are all kind of things that we'll get into at a later date. But the main thing is it has to be a mirror image on all terms, signed by both parties.
All right, so once all the terms are agreed upon and it's like, if it's bounced back and forth between the buyer and the seller, they'll initial every page, they'll initial any changes that might have happened during that part of the process, and the last signature and last date is when we got ourselves a contract. All right, so I'm working with Joe Buyer or Jane Buyer, and we happen to find the right house. We'll grab the contract and we'll write up all the terms, which will be the price they want to offer, the escrow deposit, and all the other blanks that are on there. So the buyer usually instigates the initial offer going in, so we filled out all the blanks with the terms that make the most sense for the buyer, and we present it to the seller. What happens then?
Usually the seller's realtor will be the one receiving that offer from the buyer's realtor, and they'll review it initially. Usually the buyer's agent will put it in an email and tell the seller's agent, well, here's why I put this in there or that in there. Obviously there's a lot of stuff that speaks for itself, like the price or whatever. But once at some point the seller's agent is going to present that to their seller, and hey, we got an offer and here's what it says and I want to go over it with you. Now the seller at that point, once they've received it, they have a few options. They can do nothing and just, if they don't like it, they don't have an obligation to counter.
It's out of here.
They can let it expire. One of the things as a buyer's agent is going to do is they're going to put a limit in there as to the offer is good for a limited period of time, maybe 36 hours, 48 hours, whatever it is, 72 hours. We want to know an answer by a certain time, because if we're not going to get this property, we got other properties we want to offer on or whatever. So what usually happens though is the seller will counter and say, well, I don't want that price, but for a little bit more, or usually counter on price or something like that. Price is obviously the most important term for most people. So the one thing that's very important to understand though is when you counter an offer, you have in essence rejected that offer, and that offer is now it's dead. So you can't go back and say, well, okay, I agree to your initial offer, unless the buyer agrees that offer is then still okay for you to accept. And really what you're doing as the seller at that point is you're at that point making an offer to the buyer to sell your house for the buyer's offer, if you know what I'm saying. But every time a counter is made, it is a rejection of the offer, and an offer that is rejected is terminated. It's dead. And you have to make sure that you understand that, because when you counter, you're saying, no, I don't want that offer and I'm terminating, and that offer is terminated.
Okay. So the three things that a seller can do once an offer is presented to them: they can say, yes, this is perfect, we'll take it exactly how it's written. They can say, no way, Jose, we don't want it, and give no answer. They don't necessarily have to say anything. Or they come back with the type of counter, some of the scenarios that Michael had just gone over. But as soon as they say, yes, but, and start changing some things, the buyer could say, has those same three options. They could say, yes, we accept, no, we do not accept, or they can do their yes, but. We can agree to all these terms, but A, B, and C we're going to have to change. And that it goes back and forth. But once somebody says yes, but, the previous offer is no longer on the table. All right, so the offer's been presented, the buyer and seller finally agree to terms, and they've initialed, signed, and dated on all the final changes. So in a sense, we have that ratified contract, right?
Right, and the effective date is very important, because that's going to trigger a lot of other key functions that have to happen in the contract to closing process. The closing date might be specified, but there's going to be other things that have to happen, like loan approval has to happen within a certain time if it's a contract that's contingent on financing, the deposit when that has to be delivered. So the effective date is very important.
This is our first overview of what to expect if you plan on buying or selling a house here in Central Florida. We've got a few more that'll cover the dates a little bit more, some financing, maybe some title issues. Plus, if you have any questions about this contract, please feel free to reach out to us. You could either leave us a comment below, I'll have our contact information below, or our cell phone numbers are right there. So I'm Eric Larkin with RE/MAX Solutions, and
Michael Schneider, President of the Title Company of Brevard.
I appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you on the next video. Done.